Well, boy, did we clear out. In Texas, when the weather systems move out, it clears rapidly. And I know some of you in the Northeast are probably a bit jealous, but that's how it goes around here, for better or for worse. Let's take a look at the surface map, and for today, I'm going to focus on tropical tidbits. Typically, we do pivotal weather, but why not go around to some of the other different sites and see what they have to offer? Tropical tidbits, this is a good source of information. Let's see, what do we have here? We've got isobars in black. Let me switch off that overlay. We have isobars in black and the thickness lines in dashed red and blue. Red indicates that the column is favorable for warm rain processes. Blue tends to mean that there's likely conditions cold enough for snow. That's just a very general rule of thumb, so don't read too much into that. So let's see, what do we have here? First thing we need to do is look at the thermal gradients. I can see a belt of packing of the thickness lines right in here. It extends maybe around in here, and then there's another belt up in here. So those are likely going to be frontal zones. We can fill that in a little bit better. We can drop the boundaries down south of the thermal gradients. So I'm going to find a front right there from near Atlanta down to south of New Orleans, and likely a warm front maybe off towards South Carolina. Cold pool right there over Memphis and the Boot Heel of Missouri. Another cold pool. Do you see that right there? That big 546 line going all the way around West Texas into northwest Mexico. That's a large blob of cold air, and we're going to see that reflected in the upper charts. Now we need to see what's going on in the western U.S., and I'm going to do that by just taking the 552 decameter thickness line. It starts in Texas, goes down through here, and it looks like it goes all the way around this area here, maybe something like that actually. So this is all 552, and then we pick up the 558 back here. So this is actually a very gentle thermal ridge right through here, slightly higher in thickness than the air up here and the air down here. So it's a tiny bit warmer. This air is probably modified a bit over the past week. So we're going to expect to see a little bit of ridging in that area. And then, of course, the boundary up to the north in the Great Lakes area in the northeast U.S. We put that trough down on the south side. Well, there's certainly something right there. It's a little more indeterminate through New York and Pennsylvania. So, I don't know, maybe a stationary front or some sort of front right through there. Let's look at the surface chart. Okay, I analyzed it a little bit differently. And maybe this is not altogether correct. I think maybe that warm front actually goes a little bit like that. Maybe out here. Yeah, so maybe I need to stick closer to that thickness line. This front here, yeah, see, I was keying in on these mid-40s, and I saw it drop off a little bit in this area. But I wasn't really focusing on this field right up here. So yeah, I'll certainly have to reanalyze that front maybe a little bit further out in that area there. Anyway, let's move on. There's our system there around Atlanta. We know that that's going to come together and move up into the northeast U.S. on Saturday. Then in the western U.S., we've got this cool polar high from the northern Rockies in Texas, and a stagnant air mass across the Great Basin and Intermountain region. The cold front itself has pushed way down into Mexico. It's off the edge of the map there. Now, why don't we do something cool with pivotal weather? Let's try doing a cross-section, maybe from Kansas down to Alabama to Jacksonville, Florida. So we're going to see some tropical air out to the east and some cool polar air out to the west, and maybe getting a little bit warmer out there towards Colorado. So yeah, I'll take that all the way to Denver. So Tropical Tidbits makes it pretty easy to do cross sections. You just want to check and make sure your time is correct up at the top. Let me bring this up to the current time. So you can see that when we draw this, we're going to hold down Control and drag. Let me take this a little bit further north. I want to hit that frontal zone around Atlanta. So I'm going to actually take that towards Charleston. We let go and we get a pop-up right there. Now when we're crossing a frontal zone like we are in Georgia, we want to do the normal wind. And what that means is normal to the axis we drew. So we're talking about wind going that way and that way, perpendicular to the cross-section we drew. So we click on that normal wind, and that'll help reveal the jet structure there in Georgia. And there it is, very potent jet. Looks like right over central Georgia, maybe. And what else do we see? These are our isotopes, so we can actually visualize the cold air mass. Looks like it's right down in here. And maybe, yeah, let me try to grab another cross-section here. Now this is interesting. It captures the rotational flow around the cold core low right there. So where we have non-dashed contours, this is coming out of the page directly toward you. And that's a jet max right there. Then on the other side, the dashed lines, that's going into the page away from you. So it's coming out of the page here and then going into the page after rotating around the south side of that low. So you can see we're seeing some of the structure here going on. We see the cold core low right there. See how the isotopes bend up right there. And we talked yesterday about how cold air masses form like a dome. And there's that dome right there. So cold air down in the low levels, you see the closed 280 isotope there. That's the coldest air. And then out here to the east, that's going to be the front itself. And I guess it probably kind of curves up like that. And then I'm not really too sure what it's doing on the backside, really. But let's see if we can actually get right within that vortex and look at the structure. What we're going to find, lots of cold air all the way up to 500 millibars. Then we're going to see, due to this packing here, a very strong inversion. And then you can see how they're sagging right here. This is basically a stratospheric warm sink. So there's probably some subsidence going on right there. So let's jump in and do a sounding. So I think that vortex is right there in northwestern Tennessee. I'm going to put that dot there. And there's our sounding. And we can see that it's kind of a complex structure. There's some very cold air right there. Also some cold air from 500 down to 700. A little bit of an inversion there. That's probably the front. And then we see a very low tropopause right above 500 millibars. And there's all that warm air. And those are some of the details, how we analyze structures of systems. The models are very useful for that. I don't know if this material is kind of dry and boring. I hope it's not. However, if you want to be a good forecaster, this kind of stuff is the kind of material that you have to really jump in and enjoy. So much of what we deal with in meteorology is thermal structure, and what I've shown you is some of the essentials. And it's very important to know how to do that to be able to forecast. Upper dynamics, let's check that out. Tropical Tidbits offers us different quantities. Now, of course, one of the classic dynamic measurements is the 500 millibar heights and vorticity. And of course, one problem that I do have with this site is it focuses on shortwave troughs. The scale does not go down low enough and provide enough detail below that. And we really need to be also seeing what the ridges in between are doing. So that's one reason I tend to wander off to pivotal weather for some of the stuff. But for a quick look, yeah, this will be very useful. And we do see very strong shortwave trough there in Mississippi this morning. And then moving into the afternoon hours, actually the early evening, that shortwave trough moves rapidly into the Atlanta area. So very likely there's going to be an area of very strong forcing out ahead of it from Atlanta all the way up towards the Blue Ridge Mountains, North Carolina, northwestern South Carolina. Then, of course, we have this channel jet off to the southwest affecting Mexico there. See if that emerges out into Texas. Yeah, a couple shortwaves coming out into Austin, San Antonio later tonight. So rain chances may increase, or at least we may get clouds from that. And then the bulk of the energy comes out Saturday night into Sunday morning, but the flow is going to be very channeled. And that's because the axis of this vorticity parallels the height lines. Up to the north, the strong shortwave moving out of Minnesota and Iowa. That'll be moving towards Illinois later this weekend. Then you can kind of see how things progress early next week. Looks pretty active out there east of the Mississippi River Valley, and then we got this cutoff flow out there in Nevada. So a lot of stuff to look forward to next week. And I guess we need a separate program to actually go through all these products. Total snowfall is always interesting to look at. That gives us the total snowfall for the entire run. So if you just run that up towards the end, you can see who's been getting snow and who hasn't. So this is indicating maybe some wintry weather next week in the Central Plains. It looks like Quebec and the northeast U.S. also getting a pretty good chunk of snow as well. And look at that late in the period. 18th and 19th, GFS going for snow in North Texas and Oklahoma. That's way out there, though. That's 348 hours. But, we'll keep an eye on that. 850 millibar temperature, that's good for tracking your air masses. We can see that the bulk of the very cold air is locked up there in eastern Canada and the Great Lakes area, and then this smaller chunk into Arkansas and Texas. And you can see how things progress. Some warm air advection coming into Oklahoma, and strong downslope event there in Alberta over the weekend. Some more cold air coming south through the Midwest over the weekend. You can see these chunks rotating around the polar vortex up there in Quebec. And let's see, the next big change after that is going to be this cold air plunging south around the 10th and 11th. And then there comes another blast around the 13th, right down the plains. And then this looks like some very frigid air up here. That's going to be minus 20 at 850. That's extremely cold air. So we may get back into the Arctic pattern here towards the holidays. Look at that. That's like minus 25 Celsius there. And looks like at this time, most of that heading for New York. The precipitable water product, that's mostly something we're concerned with over the summertime. That gives us our flooding risks and heavy precipitation events. But during the wintertime, that'll tell us if we're plugged in with the Pineapple Express, atmospheric rivers, that kind of thing. Nothing like that really going on right now, just tropical air lurking off the Texas Gulf Coast. That gets swept out, so yeah, no significant moisture coming up until about the 11th and 12th. And that could be interacting with that fresh round of polar air coming south. Yeah, there it is right there. So possible squall line event maybe around the 13th, 14th. We'll have to keep an eye on that. And Just a lot of dry air coming south, return flow setting up in Texas, and that's probably where the models are going for as far as wintry weather. That's a very strong warm air advection pattern, and there's likely a lot of residual cold air at the surface that has not been eroded yet, and that's probably the reason that the models are going for winter weather in that part of the country. Okay, and that'll do it for our Friday edition. I want to thank our newest Patreon supporter, Scott Anger, from November 11th. Yeah, we've not had any new support in about 3 or 4 weeks. I would like to think that the support for the webcast is still there. So if you're enjoying these programs and you want to see them continue, I do need your support to make the time investment worthwhile. Okay, until next week, have a good one. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.